Welcome to the 401k Audit CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping companies across the United States prepare for their 401k audit. If you have 100 eligible participants in your 401k plan, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Moore. I'm the Audit Director here at Anders CPAs, formerly Summit CPA Group, and I have Karen Hill with me, Audit Manager. And today we are going to talk about getting ready for your upcoming 401k plan audit. This is our next podcast episode on the 401k Audit CPA Success Show. So welcome, Karen, and welcome all our listeners. We felt like as we're recording this, it's getting to be early December here, and we thought that for those folks who may be preparing for their first 401k plan audit, it would be a good idea to talk about what should you be thinking about as you're heading into this new territory of doing a 401k plan audit that you've never done before. So what does it look like and what should I expect? What are some tips that I can use to make sure that the audit goes well? So we have done a lot of podcasts on various topics, so we're not going to go in depth into a lot of these areas because some of these areas we've talked about before, and we'll try to highlight that as we kind of go through the discussion today. But Karen, as I'm brand new, never had a 401k plan audit. I don't know what to expect. First off, probably I should find an auditor.
Yes.
Would be my guess.
Yes. Yes. And there's a couple of ways that you can find an auditor. If you already have an auditor for other audits, you can ask them if they do 401k audits. Now, they'll probably, some of them might be honest and say, no, we don't do that, but you can use this firm. Some of them might say yes, and I'm not sure if they don't. I mean, ask them. You want to ask some of the questions. We've actually done this before, is how you pick an auditor. There's some questions you'd want to ask them, like how many audits do you do a 401k plans, to make sure that they actually do have the ability to do a 401k plan audit. You also could Google 401k plan auditors and see who pops up.
Yeah, that's how we get a lot of our clients is we find, and I hear when I talk to them that they didn't even know there was a requirement ever to have a 401k plan audit, and they get surprised by their service provider that all of a sudden not only is there such a thing and they need one. So that's how they find us, is that they just Google 401k plan audit and they see our information out there on the web, and they'll give us a call. If you are listening to this and that you're in that situation and you're like, well, how do I get a hold of you? Let me just throw out my email address at this point here. It's the letter K, then MOORE at Anders with an S CPA. So that's KMOORE at ANDERSCPA.com. Feel free, if you happen to be listening to this and you'd like to talk about in more depth what we're talking about today, or you'd just like a quote for an upcoming audit, happy to help. We also have on our website, we have a quoting tool, so you can just put some information, answer some questions, and you can get a direct quote right off our website. So that's another option if you're just new and getting into this. So yeah, absolutely. First thing you want to do is try and find an auditor, line them up. As Karen mentioned, we have a specific podcast on how to select an auditor, all the different things that you should consider. So we're not going to go into a lot of depth on that. But once you have your auditor, one of the first things that we suggest you talk to them about is audit timing, because the audits will take a good bit of time. I always tell people a good rule of thumb is 6 weeks. Could be less time than that, could be longer than that. It partly depends on your plan, how big it is, how complex it is, the levels of transactions that occurred in your plan during the year. And also, if it's a first-year audit, they usually take a little longer, as you can imagine. Also depends on the information. We're going to talk a little bit more about information gathering here in a minute. So, it's not a quick process. I get calls from people that this is their first audit, and they say, "Can you do my audit tomorrow?" Well, I can start tomorrow, but I'm not going to finish it in a day. That's just not even possible. So, you want to make sure that you talk to your auditor about timing. Now, the way that these things work, they get filed with something called a Form 5500, which is an IRS document. That document is due 7 months after your plan year end. So if you're a calendar plan year, your plan goes from January 1st to July or to December 31st. Your due date for the original due date for the audit is going to be the due date of the 5,500, which is the end of July. So that's at 7 months. You can get an extension, and most service providers will file for an extension for you automatically. That gives you an additional 2.5 months. So that takes you through August, September, and then to October 15th. Again, if you're calendar year plan. If you're not calendar year, kind of adjust your timing. So 7 months and then an additional 2.5 months. So it's tough to get the audits done by that first due date, end of July, but it is definitely possible. And even first year plans we have gotten done so that they can file by that end of July timeframe. But it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of planning, a lot of staying on top of everything. So that's one of the first things you want to talk to your auditor about is, do you really want to push to get it done before that deadline, or are you okay going to the extension time period, those additional 2.5 months? Your auditor may not have availability to get it done early. That, they have other audits that they need to do. They may be doing other audits besides 401k plan audits. So those are all discussions that you want to have with them to make sure that the auditor that you're going to select is going to be able to do the audit when you need it, and that they're going to be able to fit you in so that you won't be late. You also, at the same time, want to talk to your service provider. And by service provider, that could be a TPA, that could be a custodian, could be a record keeper. There's all different setups that you can use with your 401k plan. But I always think of, if you have a question about your 401k, who do you call? That's your service provider. You want to talk to them because you may say, hey, it's February and I want to get this done. I want my audit done by end of March. Well, the reports that the auditor needs may not be available until April, May, or June. So that timing is not going to work because your auditor cannot create those documents. There's a lot of reasons for that. Audit centers wouldn't allow it, but they can't audit something that doesn't exist. So as you're doing this timing discussion, you want to check with your service provider, make sure that the information the auditor is going to need is going to be available for the timing that you're selecting. And the last thing you want is an out-of-sync audit, that you're planning to do it early. The documents won't be ready. By the time the documents are ready, now your auditor's moved on to other audits, and so now you're going to have to file late. And that happens a lot. So definitely something you want to check into and make sure that timing is going to be good and everybody's on the same page and we're all planning to get things done at the same time. A lot of service providers will appreciate knowing when the auditor is going to be working on the audit as well, so that they can kind of coordinate. As you can imagine, they're doing this year-end work for a whole lot of plans, and if they know your auditor is going to start early, they don't want to put you at the back of the pack. They want to move you up front, and vice versa. So it helps everybody to have that discussion. So Karen, I've picked my auditor. I've decided on my timing. So what happens next?
Well, you should start gathering your plan documents and the year-end documents that you yourself are going to need to provide to the auditor. This includes plan documents, and when we talk about plan documents, we mean the summary plan description, the basic plan document, the adoption agreement, and then the opinion letter. So
from the IRS.
From the IRS. So those things should be gathered. If you've had any amendments, make sure that you include those in the plan documents, because the auditor will need to see all the amendments, including any that have occurred since year end. Now, right now, it's the end of the year, but if you're gathering you made an amendment that was effective January 1st, you want to make sure that that's included. Even because that's going to have to be, the auditor needs to know that, because that needs to be disclosed that there was an amendment after year end. You want to gather a plan census, and this usually is the same report that's provided to your record keeper in order to run the discrimination testing, which is another thing that you want to gather and give to your auditor. That discrimination testing usually is performed in January, February, because if you fail any of the testing, those refunds need to be made to the participants by March 15th. So this is something that's usually done very early. But the plan census, it'll include things like the hire date, birth dates, termination dates, the compensation, deferrals, match, all that kind of information. And it's given to the record keeper so they can run the discrimination testing. But we also, as auditors, we will also use that in our testing as well. You want to gather your payroll year-end report. The master control report is I think is usually what it's called, but whatever report is that summarizes all the activity for payroll for the entire year.
Per employee.
Per employee, yes.
We want to definitely not just see a total. I mean, we need the total page, but we also will need to see detail by participant or employee, even if they're not in the plan.
Yes.
The census and payroll stuff, it gets a little confusing because people think, well, you only need it for the people that are in the plan. And that's not true.
No.
We need it for your entire company. And if you have multiple components to your company, maybe different subsidiaries, if it's all together in one report, that's fine. If it's, I run it by plant or by location, we're going to need to see it either all together combined or those separate individual reports. So. So we want to gather up all that stuff. I also put in my notes plan report. So if your service provider, some of them, especially if you have an actual TPA, a third-party administrator, they'll give you a valuation report or a year-end kind of packet of information, and that usually will have multiple components to it. It might have the discrimination testing in it, might have some financial statements, might have a participant detail. They vary, depends on what that particular TPA feels is important for you to have. So if you already have those, gather them up, get them ready, because definitely those are all things your auditor is going to need. Now, some of what Karen talked about, so things like those plan documents, and we mentioned an IRS opinion letter. You may be saying, I never went to the IRS, I don't know what you're talking about. That usually will come from whoever designed your plan. So that might have come from an attorney. That might have come from your service provider. If you're using one of the big national providers like a John Hancock, an ADP, a Fidelity, those groups went and got that opinion letter from the IRS. So they may have given it to you, you didn't know what it was, and you may have it. You may never have gotten a copy. So don't feel like you should have all this stuff sitting all together in a nice little package you can give to your auditor. You're going to probably have to go out and gather that information. That's why we put this on the list. Is usually for first-time audits, we start with those plan documents that Karen mentioned, and you may not have copies of those. Well, you should, number one, as your fiduciary duty, you should be keeping copies of those because you should be administering the plan according to those plan documents. But our experience shows that most people don't have those, so you're going to go need to get them. And that does take time. That's going to slow down your audit. So get started as early as you can with those documents that we talked about. One of the next things that's going to happen is that the auditor is going to want to work with staff in your company. Another kind of misunderstanding that I get from a lot of people when they call me and say, hey, I need an audit. Can you get it done tomorrow? But also I use Fidelity as my service provider, as an example. So I'll hook you up with Fidelity and then you can do the audit. And I'm done. Basically, I'm just going to wait for you to finish the audit and give you the report. Well, yes, we like to get access with the service provider and get on their website and pull the documents. And a lot of them have very nice websites. Fidelity is a good example. But that will not complete our audit. We are going to need information from you, your company, and other individuals in your company. So one of the things that we suggest you do early, and maybe in conjunction with your auditor, if this is your first time through, talk about who in your company needs to be involved in the audit. Definitely whoever is the plan administrator and the plan trustee for the plan need to be involved. But in a bigger entity, or maybe if you have spread out organizations, you may need to talk about folks from HR, folks from payroll, maybe folks from your financial area, if the payments and the contributions are running through the finance area. If they're paying bills for the plan, then definitely your finance area might need to be involved. If you have a very spread out organization, so maybe payroll is being run at each plant level or each location of the organization, and they're different folks running payroll. you want to get all of those folks involved, because more than likely the testing is going to involve all of those different payroll segments. So you want to talk about that. Make sure that you've got a good list of who's going to be involved. Make sure they're available. Again, this goes to our scheduling. You don't want to schedule, I want this audit done in April. Oh, and 3 of those 6 people I need are on vacation then. That's spring break. They're all going to be gone. That's going to be a problem getting the audit done. So figure out who needs to be involved. Make sure they're available. Put them on notice that here we're going to be doing this audit, going to need your help. They're probably going to need to pull documents. So it's more than just one meeting that's going to take a half an hour. This is going to take some time. So make sure that their availability. If this is new to you, or maybe you have some new staff, maybe you've been doing audits before, but you have some new staff, then you might want to do a little mini training session and talk about the different segments of the audit. Or when you're doing your opening meeting with your auditor, if this is your first audit, ask them to walk you through the audit timeline, and when do I need to be involved? Who needs to be involved? When do you need them? That way you can make sure that you're pulling the right people in at the right times. Usually the auditors will have an opening scheduling. They may call it different things, but a first meeting with you at the beginning of the audit. The more of those folks you can get at that meeting, the better, because they can handle a lot of component pieces of the audit inquiries they need to do all at once with everybody there. And they also can learn information about your plan and what's happened with your plan during the last year. So corralling that group of people is really important. And we have a lot of first-time audits. They don't do that, and it just ends up delaying things. Takes a lot longer. Also, we like to say at this time, it's a good time to look at the access level. So who has access at the plan level? Who has access for payroll? And who's going to need access for the audit? So the auditor may need access, and so which ones of these areas are you going to give them access to? What level of access? While you're doing all of that, it's a good time to just do a thorough review of who already has access within your company. Does that need adjusted? Did Susie leave last month and you forgot to remove her access? Good time to do that. We have a separate podcast on cybersecurity. That's a good thing to check out, because it's a high risk area.
Yes.
We always like to throw that in whenever we can, because that could be a huge risk to your plan. So Karen, one of the first things that you're going to do once you've found the auditor, you've set the time, you're kind of getting ready to go, they're going to do something called an engagement letter.
Yes, you will receive an engagement letter from your auditor, and this will go over various it's sort of like it's a contract, basically, and it should include the fee structure for the audit. If the auditor is coming on site, it should go over if there's going to be any kind of miscellaneous expenses on top of the fee that you'll need to pay for, like for travel, reimbursement for travel, and that sort of thing. So I'll have all those details in there. You want to review the engagement letter so you have an understanding of what the basics of the contract is. And for us, we do a flat fee. We're remote. You don't have all those miscellaneous expenses in there, but other different audit firms might have an hourly rate. They might say there might be something in there that if they find certain errors that you might be billed more for that. So you want to have an understanding of what all that entails. So you want to review it. Then you need to sign it and return it, because they're really not supposed to start the audit if they don't have that returned. And usually there could be sticklers on that. You want anything that you read in there that you don't understand, you want to go ahead and get back with your auditor and ask them about it. Make sure you understand what type of audit is being performed. There is and I'm going to have to actually read this because it still is not coming to my head easily. 103A3C, which used to be called a limited scope. Basically what that means is that your custodian is able to certify the investments and the investment income, so we have reduced procedures surrounding the investments and the investment income. Or If they can't certify, then you will have a non-103A, 3C. So you want to make sure that you understand that the right audit is in the engagement letter, because the 103A, 3C audit is going to be less. It's going to cost you less since there's fewer procedures. So if you're able to have that, then you want to make sure. But you have to, if you're not sure if your custodian can certify, you discuss that with your custodian. You can ask your auditor if they know, what type, is this the type of institution that usually can certify? You can get that resolved.
And we have a podcast on this topic.
We do have a podcast on this topic.
So we have at least one, maybe two different podcasts. If you're 103, what are they talking about? What is that?
Yeah.
Limited scope? I don't understand that. Again, if it's your first time audit, that may be confusing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd urge you to go back and look at those podcasts for more details in that area.
Right. They may put the timeline in the engagement letter, so you want to review that timeline. Mm-hmm. If they don't put it in there, engagement letters can vary. So you want to, mm-hmm. But if they put it in there, you want to review the timeline, make sure that that everything, that you can do it during that time, or if not, even if they don't put it in there, that's something that you want to review. Just make sure that you have a good understanding of when they're going to perform the audit. If they're going to come out to your company, make sure that there's space for them, and that everyone will be available at that time when they're out doing the audit. You want to, if this is a recurring audit, you want to discuss any changes that may have occurred since the last audit, whether there's changes in the company, whether you've had amendments, maybe you've had a restatement. We saw that a lot with the 2021 audits. Not that it didn't occur in 2021, but a lot of our subsequent events were that there was something called a cycle 3 restatement. So if your plan's been restated, you want to make sure that they know that and that they have the updated documents. If there's any changes in personnel, make sure that they know that Susie left the company and now you're going to deal with Mary. And if there's any changes in service providers, that can be a big, I don't want to say it is a big deal, but it adds additional procedures. It makes the audit a little bit more difficult, especially if it's the record keeper. There's additional issues if it's payroll, but
especially if it directly impacts the plan.
Right.
And it could change the fee as well.
Yes.
Most folks will charge a little more if you're making those changes. So
yeah.
I think a good caveat when you're having those discussions with your auditor, and even before the engagement letter is better than after, but certainly even after, anything that either is a change or was something unusual, mm-hmm. Something that someone pointed out to you along the way, any of those things, and I know it's hard because an audit is after the fact, so the year has already happened, mm-hmm. whatever happened, and you've probably forgotten about it. But if you can make notes as you go along throughout the year and then remember to talk to your auditor about that, it's going to save you a lot of time.
Right. Because
the auditor more than likely will find those things.
Yes.
But they're not going to be expecting them, and then that's going to cause questions for you. And
yes.
We get that a lot. And they say, oh yeah, mid-year we changed. And it's like, well, why did you not tell me that?
And it could be something in your procedures. Like you
mm-hmm.
prior, you used to always have them fill out for distributions. They would fill out a form and bring it to you, and you would sign off on it, and then that would be sent into the TPA. And then the distribution would be processed that way. Maybe mid-year you decided, oh, well, they can do it online and we'll have it done that. If something like that changes, you need to let your auditor know.
Right. Yeah, because that could be a big delay. We're sitting here waiting for forms that don't exist because now it's done online.
Right.
So yeah, you definitely want to follow up and try to remember and go through those as quickly as you can. Once you've signed the engagement letter, the audit gets started. The auditor will give you something called a PBC list, and that's going to be a list of documents, items, questions. It could be a variety of different things that they need to get the audit going. And that can happen in a variety of ways. They may give you a manual listing, like a piece of paper. They might email you a listing, and while they're physically at your location, they're expecting you to have gathered up that information and have it sitting in the conference room waiting for them. They may expect you to give them some information ahead of time. They may want to get some information later. We use a tool currently called Smartsheet here at Summit that we gather the information electronically online from you. That's a tool that's available 24/7 and is a real-time tool. But that's how we do it. It's the process is pretty similar. The mechanics of it can be a little bit different, but that's key to the audit. Documentation information is what drives any audit. So if you're not sure what this is, and again, we've had other podcasts where we've talked more specifically about the kinds of things that you're going to request in the audit and in more detail. So go check those out if you need to. But the key here is that your auditor is going to need a whole boatload of information throughout the audit. It's not just one or two things. It's usually around 200 items if you add up everything and you count each sample as an individual. So it's a lot of information. Some of it will come from you, some of it will come from your service provider, some of it's going to come from your payroll system. But the auditor needs all of that. So either you're going to have to give them access or you're going to have to go gather the documents yourself. They're going to do some work that's going to generate additional requests. So all in all, there's a lot of information needed. The key here is be quick. Don't say, oh, they gave me that listing, I'll look at that in a month. That's delaying your audit at least a month, maybe longer, because your auditor may move on to something else and you're ready to go and now they're not. If you're unsure of something, ask the question. Mm-hmm. Don't make assumptions. Don't say, well, they asked for a W-2, but I bet I can give them a W-4 and that'll work. No, probably not. So if you're not sure what something is, you can't find something, you're saying, I don't think I have those readily available. Could I give you this instead? Ask. Mm-hmm. Don't make assumptions. Don't just say, hey, I'm just going to give you this load of stuff. Don't know if that'll work or not, but I'm sure you can make it work. Usually that will not work. So ask questions, be prompt. If you have a problem, get with your auditor. Don't wait for them to come back to you because that's just going to delay the whole process. And the process feeds on itself. So I'm going to ask you for a bunch of documents. I'm going to do some things. That's going to generate another list of requests. Then you're going to give me those. Then that's going to generate another list of requests. And it's just ongoing until the auditor gets through all the steps. So any delay or any set of wrong information delays that whole process just that much further. So follow up. Communicate, ask questions. Those are all key. The last portion of the audit then before the report is called testing. As I mentioned, those document request lists, they follow on each other. So don't assume that the auditor gave you a list of 20 things at the beginning of the audit and that's going to be the end. Unfortunately, no, each request is probably going to generate some more requests or questions. I mean, the auditor may take what you gave them, look at it and say, hey, I'm comparing report A to report B. They should match, and they don't. And I need to figure out why. Or I was expecting a certain result. I got something else. You need to help me understand. Is this an error, or is this maybe I just don't have all the information I need, or I misunderstood something? So there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of additional requests. Again, documentation is the key. One of the areas that I really like to stress with people is status reporting. Mm-hmm. So, you know your schedule. Do you like to have maybe a once a week meeting with the auditor to just face to face? Let's meet. Let's talk about where you are. Are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule? Am I holding you up? Did the auditor have something that's now getting in the way of getting the audit done? Some people like that. Some people don't want a meeting. We always ask up front in our initial meeting, what kind of status reporting do you want? Do you want a weekly meeting? Would you prefer a weekly email? Would you like me to only email you when I'm missing something, I have a question, I'm running behind? There's various ways you can do status reporting. Some folks will have a dashboard, and you could just simply look at the dashboard and be able to tell where am I in terms of the audit and the timeline that we set at the beginning of the audit. So it just depends on your work preferences, your availability, your schedule, and also the auditors and what their preferences are. So again, those are some things definitely you want to talk to your auditor about. Make sure you get that ironed out so there's, no one's waiting on the other party. Right. That everybody's keeping it moving.
And it may be different if if it's a remote audit versus if they're on site. If they're on site, the updates are probably going to be much more frequent, because they're only working on your audit while they're out there. So it'd be very easy to say, the end of the day, that they come in and say, hey, this is what I've accomplished today. This is what we're still have left. If it's a remote audit, your auditor may be working on a couple audits at the same time. So it probably would not be a daily update. But just if they're on site, it's much easier at that point for them to pop in. Of course, they're also going to, it's much more likely that they're going to be interrupting things as well. So, there's advantages to each type of audit.
Yeah, there definitely is. There's a whole lot more. We could go on all day here with, how to get started with your audit. I would encourage you to look back at some of our other podcasts if you need more information. Or again, my email, letter K, MOORE at Anders, ANDERS, CPA.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, you'd like more detail, you have an idea for a future podcast, or if you just, you need an audit, or you think you're going to need one upcoming and you'd like to talk through that process and talk about pricing, timing, etc. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up today's podcast. Any final thoughts, Karen?
We didn't really discuss about the closeout of the audit. Sometimes they might be a closing meeting if you have an audit. If the auditor found any internal control issues or problems, they might want to discuss that with you. Hopefully they've discussed that along with the audit. But if they found some, they should receive a memo that goes over that sort of thing.
Yeah, and feel free to ask for feedback if you don't get it.
Yes.
I mean, that is definitely within your purview to ask the auditor to give you comments on how things went, how could things go better,
what kind of reports you're
improvements
going to get. If you're going to get an actual physical paper report alongside PDF, they will provide you with a PDF, though, because that's what needs to be attached to the Form 5500. But if you want a physical report along with that, you need to let them know.
Right. Well, I think that will wrap up our discussion for today. As I mentioned, thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out via email, and I'd be happy to help you with that. But with that, we will wrap up this month's episode. Thank you again for listening.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at anderscpa.com/401k to get more tips and strategies for achieving 401k audit success. We're here to be a resource with ever-changing rules and regulations.